John's speech is entitled George Beck. George Beck is a historical figure from Wyoming. He lived in Sheridan, Wyoming, and founded Cody. Here is the tale of George's adventure in the establishment of Cody, Wyoming in the late 1890s. Please help me welcome John Barnes.
Whee, Lordy, it is a beautiful day outside today, and I'm happy to be here. My name is George Beck, and I own a nice little ranch back up against the base of the Bighorn Mountains. And on that ranch, I raise Texas Longhorns. You know, I have a wonderful ranch manager. I have a whole group of good ranch hands. And that allows me to get up on top of the Bighorn Mountains to do some prospecting. And while I was up on top of the Bighorn Mountains, I was on the west side, and there was a big, huge basin that stretched out in front of me. And as I looked to the far side of the basin, I could see a mountain. And it was a long mountain, and then it came to an end. And then it dropped off. And one of my friends came back from being in that area and told me that where that mountain dropped off, that there was a nice shoulder on that mountain that could potentially be irrigated. So in the summer of 1895, I sent my ranch hands over to take a look at things. And they took their wagons and they made the trip over into that country. And they came back in the fall of 1895, and they let me know, yes, in fact, there was land over there to be had, land that could be irrigated. There was a river, a good source of water. So during the winter of 1895 and 96, I met with my investors. And we decided that the following year would be a good year for us to go over as a group of investors and take a look and potentially prepare the paperwork that would need to be prepared. But during that winter, William F. Cody, more commonly known as Buffalo Bill, came to our group and said he wanted to be involved. We weren't for sure that we wanted him involved. He wasn't willing to put any money in, but he wanted to be involved. And we had a lot of discussions. We just were tugged one way or the other, and we ultimately felt that just his notoriety would provide us with enough publicity that that would offset him being involved. So we thought, okay. So in the spring of 1896, we got prepared to make the trip over the mountain. We got out the wagons and the horses, and we had to drive south to Buffalo, Wyoming in order to catch the road across the Bighorn Mountains. When we got to Buffalo, we ran into Elwood Mead. He was the state engineer for the state of Wyoming, and he had a lot of knowledge about irrigation and putting together irrigation works. And we met with him, we talked with him, and he agreed to come along with us for the summer to take a look at this potential irrigation area. So we made the trip over the mountain. I have to tell you, that trip was something tough. Them wagons were banging. They just about jarred our teeth out. And when we got down to the base of the mountains, we ran into the Bighorn River. And the Bighorn River was still at flood stage. And so we stopped by the river and we camped. And that night, as we were having supper, and of course we were drinking a little whiskey, we got to betting. And we each kicked in $1 to see who could build a raft and be the first one down to where the Stinking Water River came into the Bighorn. And the reason, because the flood stage, we were going to have to take the wagons down there in order to get them across to get up where we needed to go. So that evening, we set about tying together wood that we found in the area to build our rafts. And the next morning, as people got up with their hangover, there was only 2 parties of us that actually had built our raft. So that morning we got out on the river, and of course my partner and I, all we put on our raft was a keg of whiskey and an axe, because we figured it was only going to take a day to get down to the ferry, and there would be food there that we could eat. We got out on the river, and the river was boiling, and it was twisting, and it was turning, and the raft was going everywhere, and it was spinning, and we were just having a devil of a time making it down the river. We were running into rocks. We run into a pile of driftwood. We had to get out the axe and cut ourselves out. Not only once, but we had to cut ourselves out a second time, and we continued down the river. And the river kept turning us and pitching us, and we just were having a heyday. And then all of a sudden we run into that third pile of driftwood, and the front of the raft went down, and dang if we didn't lose our whiskey. We couldn't get ourselves out of that pile of driftwood, and we found ourselves on the opposite side of the river from where the wagons were going to run. So we took off walking, and it was about a 3-day walk down to where the ferry was, and we got exceedingly hungry. And we finally found an old cabin that had a jar of sugar. There was about that much dust on top of the sugar, but we just mixed it all together and ate it. The next day we found another cabin, and it was occupied, and the guy that had the cabin had just killed an antelope. And so we were able to get some fresh antelope steaks, and he had some jerky there, and he gave us some jerky to help us get the rest of the way down. And we did make it down to the Stinking Water River, and a day later the wagon showed up, and we finished making the trip up to the Cody area. Myself and my investors, we set up camp. Buffalo Bill Cody was too good to stay with us. He went a couple of miles to the west and set up his camp out there. But we all went to work, and we started looking at what we could do. And during that summer, we had the survey equipment out. We laid out where the canal was going to go. We measured all of the lands to make sure that we could identify all of the lands that could be irrigated. And that fall, when we were all done, we decided that this would be a good place to establish a town, because there was going to be an irrigation project that was going to occur. And so my investors and I went out, we pounded a stake in the ground that was going to become a town. We filled out the application, and we sent it off to the U.S. Postmaster to establish the town. Little did I know that Buffalo Bill knew what he was doing. And he sent his personal secretary to Washington, D.C. And when that paperwork come back, I'll be danged if the town wasn't named Cody. Well, that fall, Elwood Mead also went to Cheyenne, and he prepared all of the maps that were necessary, and they filed for the water rights for the irrigation project. And that became known as the Cody Canal. But you know, I finally ended up moving to Cody, and if you look at all the streets, we got them all named for my investors. There's Rumsey, there's Blindstein, there's Sheridan Avenue, Bighorn Avenue. Yes, my dream is coming true. Mr. Toastmaster.